Hey everyone, Drew here, and today we are going to make a new data-based tier list, as always, based on 100 top teams from around the world. We are going to go through all the tier changes, but first let's take a look at some of the newer units joining here. And first up we have Storm Clarice, the second character that has the ability to ignore some of these kind of passive survival conditions with her Fatal Frenzy. She basically has 3 additional hold grounds with her charges, which also makes her super fast in terms of time units, and quite possibly one of the best deadly skills in the entire game, if not the best, with her deadly gift turn in combination with the deadly momentum and the spirit production. On top of that, she can elevate stun and combo units on her own team, but regardless of all that, she is only going to S tier for now based on the data. I was a bit surprised to see that, but I do think there are 2 main reasons for that. One of which is she's not really a classic starter, but kind of should be at the start. It is really hard to get these kind of kills at the start with all the strong guards that are around right now. So to get that kind of deadly steamroll going for Storm Clarice isn't always easy if there are certain enemy characters that just won't die or that counter her in some shape or form. That means that she is often placed into later platoons where she has less impact on arena battles overall and thus also gets less true power. But also her usage overall is just not quite there, and a partial reason for that is the more difficult way to combine her with other teams. For example, she strictly shouldn't be used with burn teams, which already takes her out of a bit of a classic platoon 1 pick sometimes. And the stun and combo units that benefit from her are also not exactly the main meta of the game right now. So yeah, for now only S tier, but it wouldn't surprise me to have her stay relevant for quite a long time. And if you checked out some of my other videos on this channel, you know that Storm Clarice can just be absolutely insanely deadly once she gets going. The same is true for the next character, which is Angel Jeanne, who gets going really quickly just because already of her kind of light speed entry and a really strong survival mechanic, which keeps her alive for quite a long time, possibly until she gets a bit more vulnerable as soon as she uses the Survivor's Rush, which of course is a very good skill, very close to Cinderella's skill. However, she is indeed a stealth unit. Stealth units not doing really great right now, although with the kind of stealth shield mechanic they are slowly creeping back in, and Cinderella not being as prevalent in Platoon 1s anymore is a big driver of potentially helping elevate that further. For now, Angel Jeanne only makes it to the S tier with 42% usage. However, with the release of Kaguya, I could see her easily going into the SS tier because that kind of combination really seems strong right now. And yeah, the potential damage output from Angel Jeanne is just fantastic with the kind of combination with her stealth Ravager and as well, of course, with the Survivor's Rush. So there's even more potential damage output per time unit than, for example, Cinderella. As for Himiko, the new Storm unit, it is too early to tier her reliably yet, so I will not put her into a tier yet, but I do think she will easily go into SS tier based on the preliminary data that I saw on her already. And the same is true for Kaguya, although I don't have any data on that. I do think, as I said in my review, that she will be easily SS tier. Maybe even more if we don't see a strong burn release in the coming weeks. Stay tuned for their tiers in the next edition. Now moving on to the tier changes, we do have a bit of a sad moment here. The original Jeanne, the light Jeanne, is going down to the graveyard tier. At the beginning of Evertale 2.0, she was still a solid pick together with her sister Michaela, the kind of partial guard with the banished skill. However, at this point, really outdated and no longer used in any top team that I looked at. The same is true for Fire Corlin, another unit that was really strong when she was released in the 1.0 era of Evertale. Nowadays, that kind of crisis skill set and the Survivor's Armor are not really relevant anymore. And of course, her kind of Purify Heal, which back then was a huge change, a really strong skill, now looks old against the newer Purify Heals that we see in many newer units. On the other hand, a unit that is rising from the Graveyard tier to the F tier is Kisara, although I do think that's a bit of a fluke. I wouldn't place too much weight on that, although of course you can quite enjoy her artworks. Her skills are nothing to really compete against the top 50 units in the game. A similar thing can be said about a much younger unit. Shuten Daoji, this kind of dark poison blood unit, didn't benefit from the King Arthur introduction. And so yeah, she has to go down to the F tier and maybe hope for an introduction of a poison or blood unit that actually makes other poison and blood units more relevant again to keep her from declining further into the Graveyard tier. The two rays from the earth and fire element are not going quite as low, however they are both going to the E tier now, which is of course not great. Earth ray, really low survivability at this point, and no self-healing skills, not great either. Her Shikigami outdated compared to the other conjured units that we see with many of the new SSR releases. And Fire Ray, on the other hand, going down a bit further because she was never really a great unit, had a little bit of a resurgence with the Commander Astrid release, but nowadays we do see a bit of a decline again in burn units. However, maybe something like Kaguya actually helps somebody like Fire Ray, although her usage is just so low compared to other fire units that there isn't really much to hope for here. While Fire Ray and Earth Ray certainly never made it to the very top of units, the same cannot be said for the original Snow White of the Dark Element, which makes it even more sad to see her decline to the E tier at this point. Her kind of automatic stealth heal whenever she gets a turn was really great back when she was introduced. Great opener unit as well with the kind of Blood Assassin. But nowadays nothing really stands out anymore, unfortunately. All the parts of her skill set are being done much better in other units at this point, and without any kind of hold ground or endure or hold ground plus, she is really prone to being one shot. Meanwhile, a much younger dark unit is going down to the D tier. It is Dark Alice, which was the first unit where Sixer introduced an instant skill. However, she was badly mistuned, unfortunately, because of her kind of time locks that really hurt her a lot. I still think they were overly cautious, at least with the time lock of the instant skill, which is 100 time units, but can only be used on poisoned units anyways. And it really hurts her kind of combo with the poison and counter, because when her counter gets triggered, she usually can't even use the instant devour yet again directly, which would be that kind of nice cycle. Instant devour, poison and counter, and then get triggered again, do another instant devour and a poison and counter. Instead, she just does a poison and counter and doesn't even get the counter status effect because she got the turn from the counter potentially. But yeah, that is actually much longer than I wanted to talk about Dark Alice anyways. I mean, she does have her kind of mega poison revenge, but as we saw before with someone like Shuten Daoji, King Arthur's introduction didn't help any of the poison or blood units to get more relevant, and the same is true for Dark Alice. On the other side of the elements, we have Mizuchi, Light, and 1 year ago, she was still the very best finisher in the entire game. Nowadays, she has fallen to 8% usage only. The counter skin just does get ignored too often these days, and the TUs are just getting much faster and faster, so even the time drain plus isn't as reliable as it was at her release 2 years ago. Somebody who we often saw combined with Mitsuchi in the later platoons for a very long time makes a similar drop, although from the B to the C tier we see Storm Antares go down. Her survival stun skin and her Thunder Heart are still really nice, but just really not enough to be top 20 anymore. Another Storm unit is going down, and it's one of the worst rated units from 2023. Granted, she came out in January. It is Storm Ludmilla. She has a Storm Heart similar to the Thunder Heart of Storm Antares. A command and combo skill, which means she could be helped by something like Storm Clarice. However, many of her mechanics that were kind of new at that point are introduced into newer characters now and much more OP at that. Her survivability is just not there, and her vengeance skill is pretty bad, to be honest. Well, bad is too bad of a word, but it can't really compete with many of the newer skills that have much less conditions and higher damage output. Also going down to the C tier is the sleep unit Lightcallen. She was the first unit ever with light speed entry, which we see now with a few other units as well. Her sleep swap and nightmare skill are still pretty nice, but there are just stronger options now for sleep units. So if you are not running like 10 sleep units in your arena team, Lightcallen will probably not make the cut into the top 5. But in between all these kind of demotions, we do have a little bit of light here with a dark unit rising, and it is Angel Reset, who makes it into the B tier again. This mega poison unit can be tricky to deal with for some units and quite a menace after her revival. However, her being kind of randomly placed somewhere in your reinforcements means she is often used in later platoons, so to not screw up your game plan. And I do wish she would have had a bit of a skill set that made her more and less. For example, something like we see now with the new Dark Jeanne. Speaking of Dark Jeanne, actually, Dark Jeanne is also going down from A to B tier. 2 years ago, she was the number 1 in the game. Unfortunately, no longer the case. Still holding on better than some of the other old units, of course. The units in the last few months don't ignore revenge effects as much as the top meta units of the prior years, that being mainly stealth. So this helps her a bit. What doesn't help her is that poison is still doing not so great. Before her survivor skill unlocks, this is basically the only thing that she can do. And of course, someone like Storm Jeanne does everything that Dark Jeanne does in a stun version, but just much better. Staying on the topic of previous number 1 units, we also see Storm Elmina fall out of the A tier into the B tier. Her big thing was always this kind of up to 600% single target damage output while being ignored by most enemy units because of her stun stealth skin. However, these days her survivability is much lower, and even someone like the new Angel Jeanne doesn't change that, it seems. 2 other SSRs have better survivability than Storm Elmina because of their Hold Ground Plus. However, they still struggle and go down to the B tier. I'm talking about Lighty and Gawain. Lighty still being kind of nice with her banish skill. However, apparently this is not enough to permanently lift her up, so she is in B tier, not really countering somebody like King Arthur in the platoon ones. It seems, especially struggling of course with all these kind of deadly skills that are flying around with her kind of auto-mori production next in reinforcements, that is something that could quite possibly fuel someone like King Arthur or Storm Clarice. And Gawain, I mean, still kind of nice, I guess, against especially the fire element. However, King Arthur is somebody that does everything that Gawain does in a kind of poison blood skill set instead of overdrive, but just better than her. Gawain, of course, being kind of vulnerable without getting kills and actually needing to use a skill to reset her hold ground. Plus, moving up higher, we do see 2 demotions for Earth units, and one of them is Anya, the 100% guard that goes down into the S tier. Of course, without poison playing much of a role, even with somebody like King Arthur, somebody like Earth Anya is bound to struggle because her armor mainly depends on poisoning the enemy team. Burn platoon 1s are still somewhat relevant, and Earth Anya just melts against burn units. Compared to some of the newer 100% guards, she doesn't really have much that can keep her alive when her HP go down, and she can only use her kind of poison heart when she is below 25% HP, so this is also quite conditional. Her usage is actually 1 percentage point lower than the other 100% guard in the A tier, Light Ludmilla. And the second Earth unit that is going down is somebody that was ruling as number 1 for a long time, but no longer makes it into the top 20. It is Earth Musha. Despite the Angel Jeanne release, no luck for her, losing further relevance, although she is still used in many teams in the later platoons. Her Stealthy Vengeance is still nice, at least she has the kind of hold ground that might keep her alive, and together with Angel Jeanne, a Stealth Shield might also come into play for her. But yeah, she is 2 years old, she had a really great run, a very long run at the top, but now she finally leaves the top S tiers. Speaking of leaving the top S tiers, she still holds on quite well. However, we do see a huge drop for Light Bright Snow White in the latest SSR World Rankings, and thus she drops down to the S tier now. Of course, units like King Arthur and Storm Clarice do hurt her survival cycle quite a bit now, as well with somebody like Kaguya or the Cursed Sleep. That is also not helpful despite her hold ground plus. She's still a great top 20 unit, no doubt, but honestly I don't see a way for her to make it back into the top 10 anymore. Now moving on to the SS tier. Who makes it into this tier? Better question would actually be who makes it out of this tier and this into the upwards direction opposite to Light Snow White. Sleeping Beauty finally breaks into the SSS tier despite her huge burn weakness. 93% usage at this point and a true power that truly qualifies her to become part of this exclusive SSS tier group. I mentioned it many times before. In the absence of burn, I do think she is the very best unit in the game, though now Kaguya challenges exactly this notion. So I'm curious to see if they are going to combine their powers or if they're gonna eat away in the true power rankings, because using both of them, of course, is quite a risk against burn teams. But the thorns keeping her alive, the kind of guard ability, the kind of cursed sleep mechanic, her kind of vampiric dream devourer, all very nice things about Sleeping Beauty, although she just doesn't make it as high in the SSR World Rankings anymore as King Arthur, who is going to the second position there with just 70% usage, but having such a big impact apparently on the games that he's or she is in. King Arthur, just a unit that really shines if you field her in your first platoon and she can be combined with many other units there, which is also quite helpful. So yeah, the King's Dawn, super speed, super damage, super armor, a lot of things going her way there, and then of course the kind of Regal Eclipse, which is just really, really nice against units that haven't gotten a kill yet. Although I do have to say that she eats quite a lot of spirit and sometimes has a bit of a wonky targeting. She does deserve that SSS tier placement right now and is challenging somebody like Cinderella for number 1. Although let's see how some of these other new units are entering into these kinds of considerations. Meanwhile, Light Anya still stays in the SSS tier. She keeps the title of the very best universal 100% SSR guard. The two brides, Lancelot and Ludmilla, in the tier below her, for example, are not as good with burn teams together. 97% usage for Light Anya means you basically see her in every platoon 1 or 2 of a top player. At 98% usage, Storm Jeanne is still holding on to the top 3 position and to the SSS tier. Of course, just a very, very great combination with many, many other units, and the kind of Michaela's Vengeance still very relevant as well against somebody like King Arthur, because it might draw in a Regal Eclipse without actually killing off Storm Jeanne and Storm Michaela at the same time. Together with Sleeping Beauty, Storm Jeanne is probably the best unit to get for just one copy and immediately bringing in some great value at that. And at number 1 we still see Cinderella, the kind of hold ground Survivor's Storm unit with the Hypnoblast, who of course is being helped by this kind of stealth resurgence that Sixer is trying to introduce now with Angel Jeanne and Kaguya. Let's see how this goes for Cinderella, who is of course a bit weak against something like the Cursed Sleep, or of course Storm Clarice's Fatal Frenzy, or King Arthur's Regal Eclipse if she didn't get a kill yet. She is not seen in Platoon 1s as often anymore, but her damage output is still insane, and compared to somebody like King Arthur, it is easy to plug her in some of your later platoons as well. This is why I said before that somebody like King Arthur might see a steep drop eventually, although I do think she will stay relevant for quite a while. There you have it, the latest data-based tier list based on top teams from around the world, from Asia, from Europe, from the Americas, taking into account position data, age modifiers, player weights based on fellowships from over 100 top teams in the oldest servers in Evertale. The data and this video takes me quite a few days to put together, so I would really appreciate it if you could support me by hitting that like button and subscribing to become a true carrot. Check out my Discord server with the link in the description if you want to join a really cool Evertale community. And as always, thanks for watching.